Welcome to another episode of Unconventionally Systemic. So my name is Megan and I am joined by fabulous Vazana, luscious Lola and miraculous Mariam. So welcome. I suppose today we were thinking a little bit about therapy for therapists. And part of that is actually it spun out of something, Mariam, that you had asked about in terms of who of us have had therapy, what kind of therapy had we had, what we would recommend, whether we would maybe have therapy again. I'm asking quite a lot of questions, and there's a reason why I'm asking quite a lot of questions. So I'm going to stop and see who wants to open up the conversation. Somebody's got to want to open up this conversation.
I feel like I completely forgot. So I feel like I need to say something. I suppose like first, so at the beginning, because I asked some of those questions to all of you guys really, because I was thinking about kind of going back into therapy, and I'm talking as someone who's been in therapy before, tried kind of different things, and I found I think psychotherapy the most helpful, and kind of with doing the systemic psychotherapy course, at the moment we're not required to be in personal therapy, but I know traditionally I think in other psychotherapy courses you need to be in personal therapy. And I was saying to you guys, or I might have been thinking, having conversations with you in my mind like I do very occasionally or often, that like there's a lot of things that are coming up for me on this course. There's a lot of things that are coming up for me in kind of in the reflections and the supervision groups and the placement and also generally in the world, that this course kind of has broadened like all of my lenses and all of my perspectives, which has even led me to this point on this podcast with you guys. And it links to kind of something we spoke about before around what was it? Was it getting away from therapy or?
For those for our lovely audience, that's our lost episode. Into the woods.
Gosh, yeah. We'll try to do something around that. But I think it took me back to that point, and I was thinking, gosh, yeah, how do we decide to kind of access therapy? What type of therapy do we decide to access as people who are practicing to be therapists or already are therapists or working to support other people kind of go through not necessarily the motions, but kind of get through kind of tough things in life. But I don't know what's been your experiences, but I'll see what else comes up as you guys kind of share your experiences.
I had one really quick question, Mariam, because you said psychotherapy you found really helpful, but I was wondering what type of psychotherapy that you had found helpful.
I have no idea what this woman was doing with me. Like, I have no idea what this woman was doing with me. I know now that it must be some type of psychotherapy because in the course, it just connected with so many things. I don't know whether it was the things that I was bringing in terms of like family of origin stuff, cultural, kind of my spiritual religious beliefs, my gender roles and how I might be connecting to that, kind of links around expectations and like, you know, educational kind of expectations of my culture and where I come from. So there was things that she was bringing that I've learned over the last couple of years on this course that links in with the psychotherapy kind of reading. I'm thinking, but I don't know I don't remember. But I know it was psychotherapy when she was signing her kind of her bill to me. She was billing.
Because I'm wondering, because it sounds like, was it systemic, but like systemic for individuals, or was it?
I've got no idea, but I know I've had CBT before and I did not like it. And it just kind of felt like I needed, it felt like it was for kind of quite short term, very specific, targeted piece of work. And I thought, actually, I went looking for kind of therapy because I needed I needed kind of almost to understand the foundations and the groundings of the stuff that's coming up for me, what's actually going on there, like, you know, what are the deep rooted things. But I think I'm getting quite deep, guys. I don't know what you guys are
No, it's
thinking.
fine. I guess I was thinking other types of therapy, like what Megan was saying. It could have been maybe psychodynamic if we looked a lot about childhood or family, or it could be integrative as well, which looks at different models anyway. Let's go with integrative. It sounds like it was different stuff put in together. Yeah, we'll go with that, shall we?
But it was one of those things where it was like very, I say traditional. You know, when you hear about like Freud, is it
Oh, then
Freud?
psychodynamic.
When you hear about Freud, you're lying on the
Or
sofa,
psychoanalysis.
you're lying down,
exactly.
and all these things, and she doesn't look at you, or you don't look at her, and all of these
Yeah.
things. Like the setup of it was like that weird Freudian setup.
Yeah, I've psychoanalytical, like
from
Megan said, or
when I
psychodynamic.
did psychology in the past, it just felt like that. But I really like
Yeah.
that. But now it's all online stuff. So
Thanks for sharing. I guess I was sort of thinking, I know it's a bit of like an interview for you. I feel like you're doing therapy. I feel like it's an episode doing therapy for Mariam. But I will share my personal experience in a minute. But I had a quick question. I guess if you kind of liked that, are you not looking for something like that again? Or were you just more curious about everybody else's experience in terms of therapy?
sorry, what was the question? Because
Yes, I said if you quite liked that style that this person did with you, which you felt like was quite Freudian, and we're saying it's probably psychoanalytical or psychodynamic form of therapy. So I'm saying, are you looking for something like that again, or were you more just curious about everybody else's experience in terms of us for when you asked us about our experience with therapy? And
when I asked, actually, it sounds really selfish, but I was looking for recommendations for me to have some personal therapy. Because kind of a lot of stuff has come up for me, I think, ever since I started this course, and I just thought, but then also I've been quite curious about other people's experiences of the global majority of accessing therapy, whether they've accessed therapy, what's up them, what's enabled them to access therapy, especially people that work in health and social care industries. So I've just been I'm always struck by the stories I hear about that. So I'm also really curious about that.
I think for me, actually, it was called counseling, but it definitely felt more like therapy. So the person is registered as a counselor as well as, I think, as a therapist as well. But I think she goes by both, I think, actually. But I think for me, what was important for me to have was someone from the global majority, so someone I could relate to. And actually, she's from the same home country as me, which means she's Nigerian. And she's of the same faith as me, but she's not a Christian counselor, so to speak. Does that make sense? I feel like some people are actual Christian counselors, whereas she's just a counselor / therapist that's the Christian. And I think for me, that was really, really key because my faith is a massive part of me. And I know you guys probably already know with my many voice notes and things I share with you guys in our group chat. So I think for me, I wanted someone that I could bring that up to without me feeling like they didn't have a clue what I was talking about, but also wanted to feel safe. And I think that's something that's really important. I wanted to feel safe in that space. But yes, that was something for me. But my experience it was really good. I think I struggled initially. I remember after my 4th session, I went to it twice, 2 separate times in my life, but quite close together. I think we've been in the space of 2 years. Anyway, but I remember the first time I ever met her, after the first 4, she was like, listen, you're paying for this. So it's more beneficial if you actually talk. So I would say a lot, I don't know, to a lot of her questions and her trying to explore things with me. And I was quite shocked by that actually, because as you guys know, I seem quite transparent, quite open. I hope I do anyway. But you're thinking, are you?
You do.
So I think in like friendships or in things where it wasn't so formal, I found it easy to be open. But when it was like a structured thing, I really struggled. And I think back then I wasn't quite sure why. But now with my experience, as you guys know, I work part-time as a camp clinician, but using like a heavily CPT influence model. Now with my experience doing this, I can see, and I have a lot of people that say, I don't know, to look up the questions, and I'm like, we're not going to get anywhere. I can't help you if you don't know. But I can see how actually it can be quite hard to be open because you might overthink what the person wants to hear from you. Does that make sense? And I think I started to do that without realizing that when she would ask a very simple question, I would just magnify that in my head and not be able to give a response. But actually, she used something for me that was really helpful. You know, those Chinese dolls that like inside each other?
Oh, the Russian dolls. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Awkward, definitely Russian, not Chinese. I'm so sorry.
but they I get what
They're
you
like
mean by
stacking
why.
dolls.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
stacking goes by
yeah.
why it's like Chinese culture and stuff.
Yeah, so she used that with me and trying to like kind of unpick layer by layer, going down to like when I was like a little child, and that really, really helped. So I think once she did that with me, a lot of our sessions, she would use a lot of objects, I guess, so to speak, and we would kind of use that, and that really helped me. I think she's integrative. I'm not quite sure exactly what model, but from my knowledge now of what therapy looks like, I would say she uses different modality in her work based on what works for you. But yes, I think that's kind of my experience. I mean, someone that was definitely the same faith as me, the same culture, or from the same country as me, even actually within the country, we're from different tribes, actually, but we had that commonality in terms of, yeah. And actually she was also a migrant. I didn't know that until I met her, that she also moved to the UK at a certain age, not the same age as me, but quite similar, that just teenage years. So actually that was so valuable and important and helpful for me to really kind of connect with her. But yeah, I'll let anybody else share who wants to share the experience with therapy.
I was just gonna say, Lola, that I kind of was thinking about sculpting when you spoke about the dolls. I maybe a few years back, I was really struggling with like anxiety, and immediately I kind of like went to the NHS, which was kind of at that point my understanding of therapy was that's how you can get free therapeutic support. And and essentially what happens is, from what I've seen, is they kind of put you forward to like IAPT and like low intensity CBT, and I didn't really like it. I don't feel like it benefited me. Maybe it's just the style of like, I think there were sessions where I would get like homeworks and like forms to complete, and it just wasn't my way of it wasn't. I guess I was new to therapy at the time anyway, so it was quite an unfamiliar process for me. But on top of that, I didn't like the idea of being given tasks to do when I was home, and yeah, so I kind of ran away from that after. And then I think similar to you, Mariam, I was actually, I even contemplated it during the grad cert, but then COVID happened, and then it didn't become a priority anymore for me. But when I was undertaking the intermediate level training, I had like a similar want to kind of get some therapeutic support to help me kind of unpack and explore some of the things that were surfacing for me. And I think that's a desire that I still have, but I don't know. I don't know if it's, I feel like I don't have time. I don't know if it's the commitment. I don't know if it's the financial strain that it might have on me. There's just all these factors that I've just not put myself forward to think about. But I don't know if anyone else wants to share.
I think that's really interesting to hear, actually, Fazana, in terms of there is a bit of a difference if you go via the NHS route or if you go via the private route. I, in my previous training as an arts psychotherapist, actually, do you know what? I'm going to pause a second and go back to, because you mentioned something about sculpting, which I don't know if people necessarily will know what sculpting is. I just about know what sculpting is, so I don't know if you want to explain it anymore, Fazana, or anybody. I don't want to put you on the spot. Like, go.
I was like, damn, put me on the spot.
Gosh, is it an exam? These are all stuff that we need to write in an exam.
I guess so. It's just for more people that are listening, thinking, what the hell are they talking about? And I think, I
can say what I think my knowledge of it is. So it's around using kind of various objects or found objects. so using kind of any kind of objects. Usually, if you're working with kids, it's likely to be toys, but toys are not limited to kids. So just any kind of object, and it's when you're working with clients in a room, you'll be getting them to think about either choosing objects, or they could use themselves as the objects, and working out what their position is and what other people's positions are to them, in terms of their kind of whatever support network they have around them, like where everybody is. And if we're thinking about it in terms of a time frame, it's thinking about, okay, well, how is this connection, this kind of configuration of objects, how is this different now to what it was before? And or maybe looking into the future, where would you like it to be? Like, how would you like to be positioned ideally? Would you like to be closer to, you know, if we're working with, you know, think of like a nuclear family, so like a mum and a dad and 2 kids, then it's thinking about, okay, well, you know, mum and dad and the kids, how close do you want to be? Do you see it always being this close, etc., etc. Whistle stop tour of sculpting. Did I get that out? Was that out roughly what other people are doing?
I really liked it, Megan. Thank
Same.
you.
Just want to apologise for using such a generic nuclear family. I'll be much more creative next time when I get to examples
And include
of families.
intergenerational family homes.
Intergenerational family homes where there are parents who are non-binary or from LGBTQ background. The works. It's going to be much more inclusive. But anyway, little educational break. But now back to thinking about therapy. So yeah, there is a difference in terms of if you're going via an NHS route. I've not done it. Therapy. I haven't as yet done therapy via an NHS route. It's not to say that I wouldn't, and I won't ever have to. I may well do. But because when I was doing the art psychotherapy training, we had to be in therapy whilst we were training. I found a psychotherapist that was originally I found a verbal psychodynamic psychotherapist, and that felt like what you were talking about earlier on, Mariam, about being like lying down on the couch. And more or less every session for the year that I was working with her, I cried every single session, and to the point where I came out and I was like, what is this? Like, I'm leaking all the time. Like, my eyes are just super, like, I just can't stop crying. And I think I had to break up with her. And I do think it was like a breakup. And it was painful.
And you fired her.
It didn't feel like firing. It felt like breaking up.
Now?
Sorry, what did you say, Lola?
Have you processed it, Megan? Should we do it now?
Yeah, I processed it in the other therapy that I had. So after I left her, I had to find another therapist. Yeah, I found a new therapist, and yeah, I actually found an art therapist, and that was really, really helpful, because of what you were talking about, Lola, in terms of cutting down some of the barriers that I naturally put up. It was really, really helpful. But I suppose that aside, both of those therapists were kind of actually not that similar to me at all in terms of anything, except gender we shared in common, but seemingly we didn't share that much in terms of our identities, although I'm sure there was actually lots that connected us. But I think because of the way I kind of saw the way I came into the sessions, it meant that there were some things that I felt I couldn't share and I couldn't think about. So race and my experiences of growing up in a predominantly white area, actually, if anything, it meant that I could just be myself in terms of my assimilating self. I didn't have to like challenge that part of me, because I was in a space where that wasn't going to be challenged, because the way I presented seemed quite comfortable, because it's how I'd always presented since I was 7 and moved to the UK. So yeah, I don't know if, as much as I enjoyed art therapy and being in that space, I look back and I reflect back and I think, okay, those things that I maybe going into therapy now I would do and think about in a different way.
That's really powerful. These stories are really powerful, by the way. I just wanted to say that, like, yeah, I'm feeling it in my body. So there's an embodied experience right now in hearing these stories, and it's kind of making me think about kind of that I didn't the person that I saw, because my experience was both in the NHS and outside of the NHS. So like I had the kind of, you know, the route that you spoke about, Fazana, like through the NHS, like self-referral and things like that, and then I went for those sessions, and I think I must have tried that on 2 occasions, but something was not fitting. And I remembered kind of this woman that I'd actually accessed first through an incident from work, and she was the counsellor that, you know, that got referred to when, you know, when need to support people that, you know, if there's been like a serious kind of situation and things that they needed to work through. And she said, I'm retiring, Mariam, we're ending, but, you know, if you ever want to call me. But anyway, sorry, I'm making a joke out of kind of a deep conversation. But I was thinking that I think I want to see someone who is similar to me, but also I've had an amazing experience with someone who wasn't anything. Like, she was a white middle class woman, and, you know, and I had a really positive experience. And sometimes I wondered, and I was able to talk about the things that I was quite scared about talking about, you know. But I wondered whether I'm different now, you know, in terms of how I would go into that space now, with a lot of things that are happening in the world at the moment, kind of the stuff in the pandemic, and, you know, the heightened levels of I want to say injustice that I kind of like daily, or kind of very often kind of gets faced with, and kind of a lot of issues of power and coercion in terms of the systems kind of that I find myself around, or that we might be around, or, you know, this is my kind of interpretations of it. So I'm not sure.
It's like, I think for me it feels like it's because, and it sounds a little bit like that for you, Mariam. I'm not sure what it's like for you, Fazana, and for you, Lola, but in terms of your, like, you or us being really aware at the moment of maybe, like you say, these injustices, things going on, and it doesn't, for me anyway, it felt like it doesn't matter what race or ethnicity or what social grace is. I know, I can feel Lola already going, Megan, you better explain what social grace is.
No, I promise. I did think here, but then I remember
People
that
need to watch the
explained
previous
it.
videos
Yeah,
for
I
the
remember we
explanation.
explained the
Okay, good.
I
introduction.
mean,
I
or
think.
not
social
videos.
grace.
Listen to the previous podcast. Sorry.
Yeah, I think we explained in the first one, but yeah, I'm not that terrible, guys.
No, you're amazing at cracking the whip and making sure we're all like
In
not
shape.
speaking in jargon. It's brilliant. You're making it truly accessible.
Yeah, and that's really important.
But yeah, it doesn't necessarily matter about any of the kind of social identifiers or social graces of a person or a therapist I'm working with, so long as they can maybe challenge me or speak to experiences that I might have that I would not necessarily want to or be comfortable with or be fully aware of myself. And I think my experience previously was that the therapists I had, who just happened to be two middle-aged white women, weren't able to do that. And I think when we're thinking about the clients that we work with or the people that we work with, it's how do we keep a check of our own blind spots, and how do we make sure that we're enabling them. I say enabling them. Not enabling them.
The power
Yeah, no, I
dilemma
was like,
comes out,
don't say
doesn't it?
enabling. But providing them with a space where they feel they can bring these things in, or we can bring things in, and they can say, no, that's absolute nonsense. That does not apply to me. But at least having it there on the table, whereas nothing was on the table if I didn't bring it, and I wasn't bringing it. So it was never put on the table. But maybe that speaks of more me than anything else.
I suppose there's a reaction in me that's like, so what's the role of the therapist if it's not to almost challenge and not challenge, but, you know, the whole idea of perturbing, and not tell me what perturb is, but yeah, shake up the system and help the person to, challenge in a subtle way, but also kind of, help the other person who you're working with see these other perspectives that is going to shake up the ideas that they had about whatever it was they had about. But maybe it's those ideas that are kind of keeping them in a position where they don't want to be. And for me, that's what the work is.
An
Or
example.
maybe part of the work.
Give me an sorry.
So what was the question, Lola? You said you wanted
So you
some
were saying that,
examples.
so you were talking about, so you were wondering what the role of the therapist is in terms of, is it a challenge? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I suppose an example I'm thinking, kind of our own ideas about kind of racism and how that might be experienced by different people. If I don't have if I don't consider that white is a color too, I don't remember who did that paper, who wrote that paper.
No.
Yeah, Lizette, no.
And I don't consider kind of some of the dilemmas that might come with someone who's white or Caucasian, and I'm just kind of so engrossed in the kind of racism against kind of dark skinned people and all of these things. And let's say I have I'm seeing a client who actually they've had horrible experiences or they've had a lot of dilemmas, within their own skin, or they've had a lot of guilt or something, whatever it was. But because I'm scared of shaking up that system, I'm scared of kind of having that conversation
And naming it.
Exactly, they're naming it and being in touch of my own stuff, and also knowing where that starts and stops, and being able to kind of see the other things. I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but then there's so many more examples that I could give you, but I don't know if that's if that explains what I mean, because I think the part of my own perception of the role of the therapist is to be curious about those things, like Megan was saying, bring that into the room, and if it doesn't fit, fine, it doesn't fit, but but that bringing that in allows a space for the person you're working with to consider what that means for them, if it means anything at all. And if it doesn't mean anything, that's fine. If it means something and they want to bring it to the room, they can. It's almost like opening this up and saying it's all right for you to bring whatever version of anything that you want to bring.
No, I hear what you're saying. I think from when you were speaking, I was thinking, I guess that's also influenced by our type of training, isn't it? Where we're doing systemic family training, whereas, this is not a let's bash other form of therapy, not at all. But I guess I'm just like, we're speaking from our own lens. Whereas I guess if you're an individual therapist, psychotherapist, and you're, I don't know, integrative or psychodynamic or psychoanalytical, and the other, there's quite a few that I can't think of right now. I wonder what the train, even like art, music therapists, there's so many different, isn't it? I wonder, play therapists as well. I wonder what the modality is and what, do you get, I don't know, I wonder how they're taught about doing this kind of things. And if they would do, like Megan was saying, should I have brought it in or should I have brought it in? I don't think there's a right way to bring it in, or there's a chosen person to bring it in. The therapist can bring it in first if they want to, or the client can bring it in first if they want to. But I guess for you, Megan, you're saying after a while, because it never actually came up, it's then okay, what does this mean? But yeah, but I guess I know for CBT that's something that's named, for example. I'm not trained in it, I have to, but obviously I do some work in it. And funny enough, I almost forgot until Fazana talked about it that I actually had CBT, again, NHS, and I didn't go back after the second session. Again, not bashing CBT, because I think I need to be very clear about this. But I think one thing that I've learned now delivering, I guess, goal-based intervention, which is CBT inspired, is that I think CBT is very, very powerful as an addition, as a secondary form of intervention, personally, in my opinion and in my experience, having received it and delivering it as well. I think the fundamental and unpicking that fundamental stuff in the person is quite important before you then get into like the skills and the tools, difficult feelings of anxiety or low mood or whatever else it is that people bring to the therapy space or the therapy room. But
Lola, as you were speaking, actually, I was thinking about, I had two things in mind. I was thinking about Mariam's, what she shared about her ideas around the role of the therapist. And I was also thinking about when you were talking about CBT, I feel like it's more down to kind of what someone wants from therapy. So I guess for me, when I accessed NHS, and at the time they gave me IAPT, I didn't really know much about it. But now looking back, that was more heavily focused around symptom management. And for me, that wasn't what I wanted at that time. It wasn't to yes, I was, I was dealing with anxiety, but it wasn't, I wanted to know why. I didn't want I wasn't necessarily looking for a kind of a fix, if that makes sense, because I still struggle with anxiety, and it's something that it's getting better with time. But I think when I think about the accessibility of therapy and like clients, us knowing modalities, I guess we can sometimes make those connections to why, okay, this kind of therapy didn't work for me as a client. But when you think about, clients who access therapy not knowing anything about any modality, it kind of I guess, I don't know if I'm frustrated with the system, and that could be a whole other podcast. Let me not start.
100%.
Because it's almost like, well, who told you I wanted to manage my symptoms? Was I asked in the entire process of referral about what I wanted? Really? But yeah, no, that was just my 2 pence that I felt like I had to share.
Share away. I enjoyed it. I think it's a really valid point, and I think it's certainly not specific to people outside of mental health professions, because even within the mental health profession and within psychology and psychological therapy specifically, there is such a wealth and breadth of psychological approaches and theory that underpins it all, but also interventions, that it means that I don't know how anybody. I've been working in mental health now for, how old am I? That's a really good question. I'm getting old if I have to ask how old I am. Easily about 15, 16 years now I've been working in mental health, and I'm still feeling like I'm still getting to grips with, and I'm always learning about, and that's what makes this profession amazing, but it's also what makes it really, in terms of working in this field, amazing, because you can always be learning a different approach and technique and ways of working and relating to people. But it does mean that if you're on the other side of that and you're somebody who is on the receiving end, I say, of these therapies and interventions, it can feel like a lot like you're being done to, rather than there's some process of collaboration. And I wonder whether that makes it, we talk a lot about power dynamics in all therapies, I think, at some level. I think they talk about power dynamics, and that
I hope so.
But that makes it that much harder, because if you've just been referred and you don't fully really understand what's going on in terms of what that therapy is you're going into, and then you have what the media tells you psychological therapy is, and that can be quite distorted. It's a minefield.
Yeah, it is. And part of me was even asking myself, kind of, how do people know what type of therapy they're getting, and how do people get to decide? Or, like, I feel like kind of in my questioning or in my asking, I'll probably have like a privileged position of knowing about maybe a couple of types of like therapy styles. And from just this conversation, I'm thinking, was I looking for systemic psychotherapy? Because and I'm just thinking, what is that about? But anyway, so that's really interesting. So what happens with people who work in mental health, in terms of what therapy they may be asking for, if they have ideas of maybe what they don't want, or what they do want? It's quite complicated, isn't it?
I think one thing that's coming to mind for me is that it's really hard because it's the NHS. I think if you're not, which I really hate, but there is a stigma. So if you're not someone that maybe has like some sort of enduring severe mental health difficulties, you probably will get CBT because like Rosanna talked about, that's IAP. That's, I think is it introduction to
It's improving access to
improving
psychological
access to
therapies.
yeah, that's it, something like that. So that's what you get if you're not someone that, whereas where I guess, which is a bit sad because then does that mean that you need to have more severe mental difficulties to access a variety of things? I don't know if that makes sense to people. So if just anybody off the back of, I just want to get some help from my GP, if they don't think it's something serious, you be sent to IAPT. If it's really serious, then you have a sent to adult mental health service or children mental health service, which then there's a lot more thinking about what you might need from the assessment they might do of you, and they might be referred to maybe art therapy or different modalities. But obviously if you go private, you have the luxury of really choosing and maybe doing some research and looking into exactly what type of therapy you like to have.
Yeah, if you have the finances, definitely.
If you have the money, gosh, yeah.
And it is a lot about, also because, it depends a lot on what, in terms of the NHS resources wise, they're thinking a lot about, I suppose their bottom line is, how can we support people to stay out of hospital and to not need our services? And if that's symptom management and, for people who are like, well, actually, no, I want something a little bit more, something that will not just keep me out of, needing more and more intensive support, but something that will actually support me to kind of grow and develop as a person, not just putting a plaster. I love the NHS, by the way. I'm saying this with a lot of love for the NHS. I just also love the fact that they do need a lot more support than they ever get given. But it's so, I suppose, to wrap it up, good luck on your journey to find a therapist. I mean, I'm all for therapists having therapy. I think I think if we are to practice in a way that is thoughtful and reflective, I think part of it is we have to have the experience of being in therapy. I would recommend it to any therapist to be in therapy, but it is expensive. Private therapy. It can be. It doesn't have to be. What are you laughing at now, Mary? All of my conditioning.
I'm always the one who's laughing at something or having like a little internal kind of joke in my mind going and I just burst out laughing. Because you said it can be expensive. You said it's not always. No, that was interesting. Yeah, because I thought,
Mom's like, we're the cheaper ones.
Rosanna has the link, the hookup for the
she's been sorting me out.
Low cost therapy.
Oh, good.
Do you know what though? I think I get quite conflicted about accessing, and this might be controversial, just saying. I feel quite conflicted about accessing certain organizations where the session fee is lower, because I know that they are probably exploiting a trainee counselor. And that's probably why the fee's lower. So I get quite conflicted as a trainee. Because I know there's this whole thing about counsellors not being paid, not being able to, they're not like offered jobs within the NHS, and there's this whole thing about that. So on one side, yes, it's nice when there are organisations that are offering fees that are quite affordable compared to like the standard rate, but I get quite conflicted in going down that route because I know that the person that's going to be seeing me is probably working for free. I didn't mean to like bring the mood down. I'm sorry.
No, you didn't.
Mariam's like, we're back to the drawing board.
I love your point. No, because in my search, it's really good that you brought that up, Susanna, because in my search, I'll say it on the podcast, in my search, I found places where there is trainees who are offering therapy and they're there as volunteers, and there's other, like, these are all like private organizations. There's trainees are offering therapy but at a reduced cost. So I'm thinking the ones who are offering it at the reduced cost, I'm hoping that they are getting paid that reduced cost, and the reason why it's a reduced cost is because they're not fully kind of 100% kind of qualified, and they've got a high level of experience that they're bringing into the work and the training. So and it's made me think about what would I want you know, would I want a trainee who's being paid, or would I want a trainee who's not being paid? Because, you know, I value that person's time as well as their learning, but also, are you thinking about kind of the quality of what you're getting? But people are getting supervision. So, but no, I think it's a really good point to make, but also around accessibility and fairness.
Was there, before we wrap up, was there anybody else want to make any last points? Therapy, yay or nay? Lola.
Yay.
I would say yay.
I'd be
Yeah.
surprised if we said nay. I'd be like, what?
I know we're also talking about it in terms of for therapists that are either qualified or training or whatever, but just for anyone in general, if you've been considering it. I'm also hoping that this is a bit insightful as well about actually looking into what therapy you would like to have, what you think would be beneficial for you. Yeah, I think.
Can I do a little shout out, in fact, for anybody who is a person of the global majority who particularly wants to find another therapist who's a person of the global majority, to go onto the Barton website, because they have a directory of therapists who are of, I mean, their whole website it stands for Black, African, Asian, help me out with acronyms, Therapy Network. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what they are, so thanks. I'll check them out actually, just see what they do. I will try to link that as well in our description thingy, so that you can hopefully just click on it straight away, or at least copy and paste it into your website.
But Barton Network, please, we will get in touch. We'll get somebody to come on. It was a pleasure talking to you, ladies, and we will be back for the next episode very soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.